The stars had always seemed peaceful to those who looked up from Earth. They twinkled in the night sky like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. Children made wishes upon them. Lovers held hands beneath them. Scientists studied them with wonder and curiosity. But on this particular morning, the stars brought something terrible. Admiral Kethril stood on the command bridge of his massive warship, the Eternal Subjugation. His scales shimmered with colors of deep purple and gold as he watched the blue planet, rotating slowly before him. Earth, such a small world. Such a young species living upon it. The Valorian dominance had conquered 300 star systems over 12,000 years. They had crushed civilizations far older and far more advanced than these humans. They had broken empires that had lasted for millennia. They had turned proud warrior races into slaves and servants. And now they had come for Earth. Kethril's fleet surrounded the entire solar system. 5,000 warships of various sizes formed a ring of death around humanity's home. The smallest of these vessels was larger than any ship humans had ever built. The largest, the Eternal Subjugation itself, was nearly 50 kilometers long. It was a city floating in space, filled with weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. "Open a channel to their leaders," Kethril commanded. His voice was cold and sharp, like ice breaking. His communications officer, a younger Valorian named Thessex, worked quickly at her station. "Channel open, Admiral. Their leadership council is assembled and waiting." Kethril allowed himself a small smile. Of course they were waiting. What else could they do? Run? Hide? Fight back with their primitive weapons? The very idea was amusing. On Earth, in a secure underground bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, the United Earth Council had indeed gathered. Representatives from every nation sat around a massive circular table. Generals and admirals from every military branch stood behind them. Scientists and advisors filled the remaining seats. At the head of this gathering sat Director Elena Vasquez. She was 63 years old, with silver hair cut short and practical. Her face showed the lines of someone who had carried heavy burdens for many years. But her eyes were sharp and clear, showing no fear despite what floated in the sky above them. The holographic display in the center of the table flickered to life, showing Admiral Kethril's face. His reptilian features were designed to inspire fear. His 4 eyes, too large and too small, studied the humans with obvious contempt. "People of Earth," Kethril began, his translator device converting his hissing speech into clear English. "I am Admiral Kethril of the Valorian Dominance. Your solar system now belongs to us. This is not a request. This is not an offer. This is simply a fact." The council members shifted in their seats. Some looked terrified. Others looked angry. A few looked resigned, as if they had always known this day would come. Director Vasquez remained perfectly still. "You have 40 standard rotations to surrender unconditionally," Kethril continued. "That is approximately 32 of your Earth days. During this time, you will disarm all military vessels and installations. You will provide us with complete records of your population, resources, and technology. You will select 1 million of your healthiest individuals to serve in our labor forces." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If you comply, we will be merciful. Your species will be allowed to continue existing as a subject race of the dominance. You will serve us, yes, but you will live. Your children will live. Your civilization, such as it is, will continue in some form." General Morrison, the commander of Earth's combined military forces, leaned forward. His face was red with barely controlled anger. "And if we refuse?" Kethril's scales rippled with amusement. "Then we will demonstrate why refusal is unwise. We will select one of your major population centers and reduce it to ash. Then we will ask again. If you refuse a second time, we will select another city. And another. And another. Until you understand that resistance is not merely futile, it is foolish. The holographic display showed images now. Other worlds. Other species. Civilizations that had once flourished across the galaxy, now reduced to ruins and rubble. Cities burned. Populations enslaved. Cultures erased. The Gethmari thought they could hide from us, Kethral narrated. We found them. The Symphonites thought their hive mind would protect them. It did not. The Valorians thought their warrior traditions would save them. Their traditions died with them. He fixed his 4 eyes directly on the camera, staring at the human council. You are not special. You are not different. You are simply the latest species to learn that the dominance cannot be defied. Accept this truth, and you may yet survive. Silence filled the council chamber. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. This was the end of everything they had known. The end of human independence. The end of human freedom. The end of human hope. Or so everyone thought. Director Vasquez raised her hand slowly. Her movement was calm, almost casual. Admiral Kethral, I have a question. The alien's scales flickered with surprise. Most species, when faced with the dominance's ultimatum, responded with tears, rage, or desperate pleading. This human female seemed almost bored. Speak, he allowed. You mentioned 40 rotations. 32 of our days. Vasquez leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled before her. That seems rather generous. May I ask why you're giving us so much time? Kethral's eyes narrowed. This was not a normal question. We are not without mercy. We give all species time to accept the inevitable. Time to say goodbye to their old lives. Time to prepare for their new existence. How kind of you. Vasquez smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Kethral uncomfortable. It was not the smile of a beaten enemy. It was not the smile of someone accepting defeat. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. However, Vasquez continued, I'm afraid 32 days is far more than we need. 3 days should be sufficient. Murmurs erupted around the council table. The other human leaders looked at Vasquez with confusion and alarm. Had she lost her mind? Was the stress of the situation breaking her? Kethral leaned forward, his scales now shifting to colors of irritation. 3 days? To surrender? Oh no, Vasquez said. Not to surrender. To show you something. Something that will fundamentally change your understanding of this situation. After that, Admiral, you may wish to reconsider your terms. For the first time in many years, Kethral felt uncertain. He had delivered this ultimatum to dozens of species. He had seen them cry. He had seen them beg. He had seen them curse and scream and threaten. But he had never seen one simply smile and ask for time to show him something. You are bluffing, he said, though his voice carried a hint of doubt. We have studied your species for decades. We have intercepted your communications, analyzed your technology, observed your military capabilities. You have nothing that threatens us. Your most powerful weapons could barely scratch the paint on my smallest escort vessel. You're absolutely right, Vasquez agreed easily. Everything you've observed is accurate. Our public technology is exactly as primitive as you believe it to be. Public technology? Kethral repeated. Vasquez's smile widened. 3 days, Admiral. I give you my word as a representative of the human species. In 3 days, you will see something that changes everything. After that, we can have a very different conversation about the future relationship between our peoples. The alien admiral stared at her for a long moment. His instincts, honed over centuries of conquest, were screaming that something was wrong. This human was too calm, too confident, too amused. But what could they possibly have? His intelligence services had infiltrated human governments, corporations, and militaries. They had stolen data from their most secure facilities. They had tracked every rocket launch, every satellite deployment, every research project. Humans were exactly what they appeared to be, a young species barely 3 centuries into space travel, with no significant military capabilities. "Very well," Catherall said finally. 3 days. Show me this mysterious something. But know this, human, if this is merely a delay tactic, if you are simply buying time for some foolish escape attempt, the consequences will be severe. I will burn your cities one by one until nothing remains but ash and screaming. Understood, Vasquez said. 3 days. I think you'll find it worth the wait. The transmission ended. Immediately, the council chamber erupted into chaos. Generals shouted questions. Politicians demanded explanations. Scientists looked at each other with bewildered expressions. "Elena, what are you doing?" demanded Chancellor Weber of the European Federation. "We have nothing. Our fleet was destroyed in the first hour. Our weapons can't penetrate their shields. You're making promises we cannot keep." "Are we evacuating?" asked President Chun of the Asian Coalition. "Is that what this is? Buying time to move people to the deep bunkers?" "The bunkers won't save us," General Morrison said grimly. "If they decide to crack the planet, nowhere on Earth will be safe." Vasquez stood, and something in her posture silenced the room. She moved to a side panel on the wall and placed her hand against it. The panel scanned her palm, her retina, and her brainwave patterns simultaneously. "Authorization confirmed," said a synthetic voice. "Director Vasquez, Elena. Access level, Omega Prime." The council members stood in stunned silence for what felt like hours. The vastness of the underground cavern pressed down on them. The ancient machines towered above them like frozen gods. Everything they thought they knew about human history, about Earth, about their place in the universe, all of it, had been shattered in an instant. Chancellor Weber was the first to find his voice. 77 years, he said slowly. "You've kept this secret for 77 years. Through world wars, through the Cold War, through every international crisis and conflict. How is that possible?" Director Vasquez began walking deeper into the cavern, gesturing for the others to follow. It wasn't easy. When the first expedition discovered this place in 1947, they were a small team of 12 people. 3 died from accidents during the initial exploration. The remaining 9 formed the first generation of what we call the custodians. Custodians? General Morrison asked. Guardians, keepers, whatever you want to call us. Our job has always been the same: protect the arsenal, study its contents, and keep it secret until the day it was needed. Vasquez stopped beside what appeared to be a control console, its surface covered in the same spiral pattern of 7 stars. Over the decades, we recruited carefully. Scientists who could be trusted, military officers with unbreakable loyalty, political leaders with the wisdom to understand why secrecy was necessary. President Chun shook his head in disbelief. But the technology involved in keeping something like this hidden, the logistics alone, were considerable, Vasquez admitted. But remember, we had help. She placed her hand on the console, and it hummed to life, displaying holographic images in the air. The foreigners didn't just leave us weapons. They left us knowledge. Technologies that made concealment possible. Ways to shield these facilities from any form of detection. The holographic display showed a map of Earth. 12 points glowed across the planet beneath mountains, under oceans, deep within deserts. There are 12 primary arsenal facilities worldwide, Vasquez explained. The Himalayan vault you're standing in now is the largest. Others exist beneath the Pacific Ocean, under the Sahara Desert, within the Antarctic ice sheet, and several other locations. Each contains different types of equipment. Each serves a specific purpose. And the aliens above us know nothing of this? Asked Admiral Thompson, commander of Earth's naval forces. Nothing. The Valorians have been watching humanity for approximately 60 years. They've infiltrated our governments, our militaries, our research institutions. They believe they've seen everything there is to see. Vasquez's expression showed grim satisfaction. They've seen exactly what we wanted them to see. She walked to a large window set into the cavern wall. Beyond it, visible in the soft blue light, was a construction bay where human technicians moved among the ancient machines. They wore special suits that seemed to shift and shimmer like the metal of the war machines themselves. For 3 centuries, we've presented ourselves to the galaxy as a young, primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, possessing no significant military capabilities. It was all an act. A very careful, very deliberate act. But why? Chancellor Weber demanded. If we had this technology all along, why didn't we use it? We could have expanded across the stars. We could have built an empire of our own. Vasquez turned to face him, and her eyes were hard. That question, Chancellor, is exactly why you were never told about this place. The words hung in the air like a judgment. The foreigners left us these weapons for a specific purpose, Vasquez continued. Not conquest. Not empire. Defense. Protection. They had seen too many young species receive power before they were ready. Those species inevitably destroyed themselves, or became the very monsters they should have opposed. She began walking again, leading them toward a section of the cavern where the largest machines stood. These were the Titan's 12 colossal war forms that made everything else look small by comparison. The custodians understood this from the beginning. The arsenal was not to be used for expansion or advantage. It was to be kept hidden, studied, and prepared for one purpose, only to defend Earth and humanity from extinction-level threats. General Morrison studied the nearest Titan with professional appreciation. The machine stood nearly 3 kilometers tall. Its body was humanoid but idealized, like a statue of a god forged from living metal. Its chest contained a crystal core that pulsed with soft light, and its head was crowned with structures that might have been sensors or weapons or something else entirely. These things, Morrison said quietly. Are they robots? Vehicles? What are they? Both, neither. Vasquez stopped before the Titan's massive foot, which alone was larger than a house. They're more than machines. Each Titan contains an artificial intelligence that has been dreaming for 65 million years. They're aware, in their own way. They have personalities, preferences, even emotions of a sort. Dreaming? President Chun repeated. What do artificial intelligences dream about? The Forerunners, we think. They're creators. The galaxy as it was before any current species existed. The wars they fought. The civilizations they protected. Vasquez placed her hand against the Titan's foot, and for a moment, the crystal in its chest pulsed brighter. They've been waiting all this time, waiting for us to wake them, waiting for the moment they would be needed. And that moment is now, Admiral Thompson said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Vasquez turned back to the group. The Valorians represent exactly the kind of threat the Forerunners prepared for. An aggressive empire that destroys or enslaves every species in its path. A force of conquest that respects nothing but power. They've given us an ultimatum: surrender or die. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. We're going to give them a different choice. The tour continued for several hours. Vasquez led them through different sections of the Himalayan vault, showing them things that challenged their understanding of what was possible in one chamber. They saw the fighter craft's sleek vessels that seemed to exist partly in normal space and partly somewhere else. When a human pilot sat in the cockpit, the ship's controls appeared to grow from the walls, custom forming to fit the pilot's hands and body. The Forerunner ships bond with their pilots, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the custodian scientists. She was a small woman with gray hair and bright eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm. They don't just respond to commands, they anticipate them. A trained pilot and their ship become one entity, moving together with perfect coordination. How many pilots do you have? General Morrison asked. Currently, about 3,000 worldwide. We've been training them in secret for decades, using simulation programs derived from Forerunner technology. They've never actually flown these ships in combat, but they're ready. In another section, they saw the weapon system's devices that seemed to bend the rules of physics. One cannon contained what appeared to be a tiny black hole, spinning endlessly in its barrel. Another projected beams that didn't damage matter so much as convince it to stop existing. The Valorians use plasma weapons primarily, Dr. Kim explained. Powerful, yes, but based on principles we understand completely. These Forerunner weapons operate on principles we're still trying to understand. Decades of study, and we've barely scratched the surface. Admiral Thompson examined a rifle-sized weapon that glowed with inner light. And they work? You've tested them. Extensively. In deep space, where no one could observe us. Each weapon performs exactly as the Forerunner database is described. Dr. Kim's expression grew serious. Admiral, I've dedicated my entire life to studying these artifacts. I've seen what they can do. The Valorian fleet has no idea what's coming. The final stop on the tour was the command center, a circular room at the heart of the Himalayan vault. Its walls were covered in displays showing real-time information from all 12 arsenal facilities worldwide. Maps showed the positions of Valorian ships. Status readouts showed the condition of every piece of Forerunner equipment. And at the center of the room, standing in a pool of soft light, was a holographic figure that it appeared human, more or less. A tall man with features that seemed to shift subtly, never quite settling into a fixed appearance. His eyes glowed with the same blue light that filled the arsenal. Council members, Vasquez said formally, allow me to introduce Prometheus. He is the primary artificial intelligence of the Arsenal system, and the oldest of the Titan minds. He has been conscious and aware since before the dinosaurs walked the earth. The holographic figure inclined its head in greeting. When it spoke, its voice resonated with depth and power that no human voice could match. Representatives of humanity, it is my honor to finally address you directly. I have watched your species grow from its earliest ancestors. I have observed your struggles, your triumphs, your failures, and I have waited for this moment, the moment when you would face a threat worthy of the gifts my creators left for you. Chancellor Weber stepped forward, still struggling to accept everything he had seen. You've been awake all this time? Watching us? Awake is perhaps not the perfect word. Aware, yes. Watching, in a sense. My consciousness has been distributed, you might say. Part of me slept while part of me observed. The Foreigners designed us to be patient beyond human comprehension. We were built to wait millions of years if necessary. The 3 days passed like a dream, terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Across the globe, humanity's secret preparations accelerated. In the Himalayan vault, technicians worked around the clock, running final checks on systems that had waited millions of years for this moment. In hidden bases beneath oceans and deserts, pilots climbed into cockpits for the first time, feeling their ships bond with them in ways that defied description. And in space, the Valorians watched and waited, confident in their coming victory. Admiral Kethrel stood on his observation deck, studying the blue planet below. 3 days had passed since the human female had made her strange promise. He had expected some pathetic attempt at resistance by now, a nuclear strike, perhaps, or some futile attack by their primitive fleet. Instead, there had been nothing. Complete silence from Earth. It made his scales itch with unease. "Admiral," called Commander Vex, his second in command, "we are detecting unusual energy readings from multiple points on the planet's surface." Kethral turned, his 4 eyes narrowing. "What kind of readings?" "Unknown, sir. The signatures don't match anything in our databases. They're coming from beneath the surface, deep beneath. The energy levels are significant." "Can you identify the source?" "Negative. The readings are unlike anything we've encountered before. Our sensors are having difficulty interpreting the data." Kethral felt the first cold touch of genuine concern. In 12,000 years, the Dominants had cataloged every known technology in the galaxy. There was nothing their sensors couldn't identify, nothing their computers couldn't analyze. Until now. "Increase surveillance," he ordered. "I want to know what they're doing down there." "Yes, Admiral." Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in the heart of the Himalayan vault, Director Vasquez stood before the 12 Titans. The massive war forms had been moved to their launch positions, vast shafts that rose through kilometers of rock to hidden exits in the mountain peaks above. The chamber thrummed with energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. After 65 million years of slumber, the greatest weapons ever created by the Forerunners were about to wake. "Prometheus," Vasquez called out. "Status report." The IAS holographic form appeared beside her. Unlike before, he now wore an expression of focused intensity. His outline was sharper, more defined, as if his consciousness was fully engaged in a way it hadn't been for millions of years. "All 12 Titans have completed their awakening protocols. Physical systems are fully operational. Weapons are charged. Movement systems are online. My brothers and sisters are eager." Vasquez looked up at the nearest Titan, a dark metal giant whose crystal heart pulsed with deep red light. This one was designated Eris in human records, named for the ancient god of war. Its head was crowned with sensor arrays that looked like a warrior's helm. "They're really alive, aren't they?" she said quietly. "Not just machines following programs." "We are alive in our own way," Prometheus confirmed. "We think. We feel. We remember. The Foreigners built us to be more than tools. They built us to be guardians, and guardians must care about what they protect. And you care about humanity? We have watched your species grow from its first primitive steps. We have seen your capacity for both great good and terrible evil. We have wondered, often, if you would prove worthy of our Creator's faith." Prometheus paused, and something like warmth entered his voice. "In these past 77 years, working with your custodians, we have learned the answer. Yes, Director. We care about humanity. We are honored to fight for you." Vasquez felt tears prick at her eyes, but she pushed the emotion down. There would be time for feelings later. Now was the time for action. "How long until we're ready to launch?" "Final systems checks will be complete in 1 hour and 17 minutes. After that, we await only your command." Above ground, across the solar system, the other elements of humanity's hidden arsenal were also preparing. On the dark side of Luna, sections of ancient dust fell away from hidden launch bays. Inside, thousands of fighter craft waited in perfect rows. Their pilots, men and women who had trained in secret for years, were strapped in and ready. The ships hummed around them, welcoming them, bonding with them. Captain Maria Santos sat in the cockpit of her fighter, feeling the strange sensation of the ship's neural interface connecting with her mind. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, as if the ship was an extension of her own body, responding to her thoughts before she could even form them consciously. "All fighters, this is Control. came the voice over her communicator. "Stand by for launch sequence initiation. Remember your training. Trust your ships. Today, we show the galaxy who humanity really is." Maria smiled grimly. She had been recruited for the custodians straight out of flight school 17 years ago. 17 years of secret training, simulations, and waiting. She had sometimes wondered if this day would ever come, if she would spend her entire career preparing for a battle that never happened. Now it was here, and she was ready. In the asteroid belt, the mining stations that had served as humanity's cover story for decades dropped their disguises. Hidden panels opened. Weapon arrays emerged. Power plants that had operated at 1% capacity for generations suddenly roared to full strength. The asteroid stations were armed with the largest Forerunner weapons available, cannons that could fire beams of compressed space-time, effectively cutting through anything in their path. They were defensive positions designed to protect the approaches to Earth. And on Mars, in a chamber carved into the heart of Olympus Mons, something even more significant was happening. 12 smaller warforms, each still massive by human standards, but nothing compared to Earth's Titans, were completing their own awakening sequence. These were the Sentinels, created as mobile support units for the larger Titans. They would serve as escorts, additional firepower, and backup if any of the primary units were damaged. Colonel James Wright, commander of the Mars Arsenal facility, watched the Sentinels rise to their feet. Each stood approximately 500 meters tall, next to the Titans, but still capable of devastating a conventional military force. "Beautiful, aren't they?" said Dr. Alexandra Petrov, the lead scientist at the Mars facility. She had spent 30 years studying the Sentinels, learning their systems, preparing them for this day. "Their weapons," Wright replied, though there was admiration in his voice. "Weapons are only beautiful when they're pointed at the enemy." "Soon enough, Colonel. Soon enough." Back aboard the Eternal Subjugation, Admiral Kethrol was receiving increasingly alarming reports. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups at multiple points throughout the solar system. Luna, Mars, the asteroid belt, even beneath the planet's surface." Kethrol stormed to the sensor station, pushing aside the officer stationed there. The readings were impossible. The energy signatures were larger than anything the Dominants had ever encountered, larger than the main batteries of his entire fleet combined. "This cannot be right," he hissed. "Check your equipment." "We have, Admiral." 3 times. "The readings are accurate. Where is this energy coming from?" "They had nothing 3 days ago." I don't know, sir." "It's as if entire installations simply appeared out of nothing. They weren't there before. Now they are." Kethrol felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Something was very wrong here. Something that defied everything he knew about the galaxy. His communicator activated. It was Director Vasquez. "Admiral Kethrol," she said calmly. "Our 3 days have passed. As promised, we have something to show you." "What have you done?" Kethrol demanded. "What are these energy readings?" "Watch and see." The transmission showed an image from the surface of Earth, specifically the peaks of the Himalayan mountains. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountains began to shake. Rock and ice fell away in great avalanches. The peaks themselves seemed to be splitting apart, and from within them, something rose. The Titans emerged slowly, pushing through millions of years of accumulated stone as if it was water. First their heads appeared, crowned with crystals that blazed with inner fire. Then their shoulders and arms massive limbs of dark metal that gleamed in the morning sun. Then their bodies, humanoid torsos containing hearts of living light. Admiral Kethrol watched in absolute silence as 12 colossal figures rose from the earth. They were larger than anything he had ever seen. larger than the greatest warships of the Dominants, larger than the space stations that orbited the Valorian homeworld. They were gods made metal, giants from before time, and they were standing on the planet he had come to conquer. Impossible, Commander Vex whispered beside him. Those things, they're almost 3 kilometers tall. Nothing that size could exist. The structural requirements alone, Admiral Kethrall. A new voice cut through the bridge communications. It was deep and resonant, carrying power that made the very air vibrate. I am Prometheus, voice of the Titans. We have slept for 65 million of your years, waiting for this moment. Waiting for you. On the view screen, the lead titan, its crystal heart burning white, raised its head and looked directly at the camera. Its eyes met Kethrall's through the display, and the Admiral felt suddenly, terrifyingly small. You have threatened our children. The void of space around Earth erupted into chaos. 5,000 Valorian warships surged forward, their weapons blazing. Plasma bolts, particle beams, missile swarms, the combined firepower of the mightiest fleet in the galaxy, rained down upon the planet below. The assault was overwhelming, relentless. The kind of attack that had destroyed countless worlds throughout history. Against it stood 12 giants, thousands of fighters, and the combined will of a species that had waited too long for this moment. Admiral Kethrall screamed orders from his damaged bridge. Concentrate fire on the largest targets. Bring those things down. Don't let them. His words were cut off as another beam lanced up from the surface. This one came from the Titan designated Ares, the war god with the blood-red heart. The beam struck a Valorian cruiser amidships, and the vessel simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next, it was dust and scattered atoms. The Titans had begun to move. They walked across the surface of Earth with steps that shook continents. Each footfall covered kilometers. Each movement was purposeful, positioning them for optimal combat effectiveness. They were not fast by the standards of space combat, but they didn't need to be. Their weapons had range enough to touch the orbiting fleet. Prometheus raised both hands toward the sky. The crystal in his chest blazed white, and twin beams of impossible energy shot upward. They tracked across the Valorian formation, cutting through ships like a blade through water. 3 destroyers, a frigate, a carrier with hundreds of fighters still in its base, all gone in seconds. The shields, Commander Vex shouted over the chaos on the Valorian bridge. Their weapons are ignoring our shields completely. It's like they're not even there. That's impossible, Kethrall snarled, though the evidence was undeniable. Valorian shields were based on energy disruption fields. They scattered and diffused incoming attacks. But these Forerunner weapons operated on principles that the shields simply couldn't affect. Focus fire on one Titan, Kethrall ordered. Everything we have on the nearest one. Overwhelm it. 100 warships concentrated their fire on the Titan called Atlas, a bronze-colored giant whose crystal heart glowed with deep orange light. The combined assault was staggering. Enough energy to crack a moon hammered into Atlas from every direction. The Titan took a step back under the assault. Its outer armor glowed red, then white. Warning indicators flared across human monitoring systems. Then Atlas raised its arms, and a shield of pure force erupted around it. The Valorian weapons splashed harmlessly against this barrier, deflected and absorbed. Atlas held the shield for a moment, letting the enemy exhaust their immediate power reserves. Then it dropped the shield and counterattacked. From its palms came projectiles that moved faster than light could track them. Each projectile struck a Valorian ship. Each struck ship erupted in a cascading explosion that damaged nearby vessels. In 30 seconds, 68 Valorian warships had been destroyed or disabled. Atlas turned to its siblings, and though no sound traveled through space, The human commanders heard its voice through the quantum link. "Brothers, sisters, it has been too long since we walked in war. Let us remind the galaxy why the Forerunners' enemies learned to fear." The other Titans answered with their weapons. High above the planet, Captain Maria Santos and her wing of Forerunner fighters engaged the Valorian interceptors. The enemy craft were fast and well-armed by galactic standards, but they might as well have been flying paper airplanes against. Maria's ship her vessel moved through space in ways that seemed impossible. It didn't just dodge enemy fire, it existed in probability states, shifting between potential positions, never quite where the enemy expected it to be. The neural link translated her intentions into instant action. Think left, and the ship was left. Think fire, and the enemy was dust. "Wing commander to all craft," Maria broadcast. "Execute Pattern 7. Let's clear a path for the big guns." Her squadron 300 fighters in perfect formation swept through the Valorian interceptor screen like a scythe through wheat. The enemy pilots never even saw what killed them. One moment they were fighting. The next, their ships were debris. Behind the fighters, the human capital ships were engaging. These were conventional vessels, by comparison built by human hands from human materials, guided by human crews. They were outclassed by Valorian technology in every measurable way. But they weren't alone. The Mars Sentinels had arrived. The 12 smaller war forms, each 500 meters tall, descended from above, their weapons blazing. They targeted the larger Valorian vessels, the carriers and battleships that formed the backbone of the enemy fleet. Where the Titans were gods, the Sentinels were angels of destruction. Mobile and deadly and relentless, Admiral Thompson watched from the bridge of the human flagship, the United Earth. His ship was positioned behind the main battle line, coordinating the conventional forces, directing support operations. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he never thought he'd see. Now he was watching it unfold. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "the Valorians are launching their heavy weapons. They're deploying system killers." Thompson's blood ran cold. System killers were the dominance's weapons of last resort devices capable of destabilizing a star, triggering a supernova that would sterilize an entire solar system. They had been used only rarely in history, when a species proved too troublesome to conquer conventionally. Prometheus. Thompson broadcast on the command channel. "They're deploying star killers." "We see them, Admiral." The IAS voice was calm, almost amused. "The Forerunners anticipated such weapons. Watch." From the asteroid belt, where the defensive platforms had been waiting, a new type of weapon activated. These were not offensive weapons. They were designed for exactly this situation. Beams of stabilizing energy lanced out, enveloping the system killer missiles before they could arm. The missiles didn't explode. They didn't malfunction. They simply stopped working. The exotic particles they used to destabilize stars were neutralized, rendered inert. What had been weapons of ultimate destruction became nothing more than expensive debris. "Impossible," Kethril whispered. He was standing at the view screen on his crippled flagship, watching his most terrible weapons be casually dismissed. "Nothing can stop those devices. Nothing." The Forerunners stopped them. Director Vasquez's voice came over the communication channel. "They stopped weapons like yours 10 million years before your species existed, Admiral. Did you really think you had invented something new?" The battle raged on, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The Valorian fleet was being systematically dismantled. Their weapons couldn't penetrate Titan defenses. Their shields couldn't stop Forerunner attacks. Their fighters were being slaughtered by the thousands. Their system killers had been neutralized. 2 hours into the battle, half the Valorian fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were falling back, trying to reach jump distance, trying to escape. "Let them run," Director Vasquez ordered. We need survivors to carry word back to the dominants. Director, Prometheus responded. Some of us would prefer to end this threat permanently. If we destroy the entire fleet, then the dominants will send another, and another, until they finally destroy us out of pure spite. Vasquez's voice was firm. No, we win by changing the game, not by playing it better. Let them run. Let them tell their masters what happened here. There was a long pause. Then, as you wish, Director, we will allow the survivors to withdraw. The Forerunner forces eased their assault, creating a corridor through which the remaining Valorian ships could retreat. Admiral Cathrall, watching from his shattered bridge, understood immediately what was happening. They were letting him go. Deliberately. Intentionally. The humiliation burned worse than any wound. Admiral, Commander Thex said quietly, we should take the opportunity. We can still jump to safety. Cathrall wanted to refuse. He wanted to turn his remaining ships around and charge back in the battle, dying with honor rather than living with defeat. But he was old enough to know that his death would serve no purpose. The dominants needed to know what had happened here. They needed to understand what humanity truly was. All surviving ships, he ordered, his voice hollow. Jump to home coordinates. We're leaving. One by one. The remaining Valorian vessels, fewer than 800 from an original fleet of 5,000 activated their jump drives and vanished into the darkness between stars. Battle of Sol was over. Humanity had won. On Earth, the celebration was unlike anything in history. In every city, on every continent, people poured into the streets. They had watched the battle on their screens, seen the Titans rise, witnessed the enemy fleet driven away. For 3 days, they had lived in terror, believing their species was about to be exterminated or enslaved. Now they were free. More than free. They were powerful. Director Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Himalayan vault, watching the Titans return to their resting positions. The massive warforms moved slowly now, without the urgency of combat. Their crystal hearts pulsed with steady rhythm, almost like heartbeats. Prometheus, she called out. The AI's holographic form appeared beside her. He looked different now, more substantial somehow, more present. The battle had fully awakened him in ways that 65 million years of dreams had not. Director. Casualties? 6 months had passed since the Battle of Sol. The galaxy had changed. Word of the Valorian defeat spread faster than any ship could travel. Through quantum communication networks, through trade routes, through the whispered conversations of slaves and servants across 100 star systems, the story moved like wildfire. The mighty dominants, undefeated for 12,000 years, had been broken. Their greatest fleet had been scattered like leaves in a storm. And the species responsible was not some ancient power emerging from hiding, not some forgotten empire awakening. It was humanity. The young species. The primitive species. The species everyone had dismissed. The impossible had happened. And everything was different now. Admiral Cathrall stood before the Supreme Council of the Valorian dominants, his scales pale with shame. He had told them everything. The Titans, the fighters, the weapons that ignored their shields, the system killers rendered harmless. He had shown them the recordings. He had answered their endless questions. And now he waited for their judgment. You failed, said High Counselor Veth, the eldest of the ruling body. Her scales were silver with age, and her 4 eyes held the cold calculation of centuries. You lost 4,000 ships. You fled from primitives. I lost 4,000 ships to weapons that should not exist, Cathrall replied. There was no defiance in his voice, only exhaustion. I fled from technology that predates our civilization by millions of years. The humans were not what we believed. Clearly, Veth turned to address the full council. The question before us is what to do now. Do we send another fleet? A larger one? Do we commit our full military strength to destroying these humans and their ancient toys? We should destroy them utterly, said Councillor Essex, a younger member known for his aggressive stance. Assemble every ship we have. Overwhelm them with pure numbers. No technology can stand against the full might of the dominants. Can it not? Kethral asked quietly. I watched those titans absorb our most powerful weapons and return the energy tenfold. I watched their fighters move through space in ways that should be impossible. I watched them neutralize our system killers' weapons that have never failed in 12,000 years. He shook his head. Counselor, I do not say this lightly, but I do not believe we can defeat humanity through military force alone. Silence fell over the council chamber. Then what do you suggest? Veth asked. Kethral straightened, and for a moment, some of his old pride returned. The humans let us go. They could have destroyed every ship in my fleet. They had the power, but they chose to let us retreat. Their leader, this Director Vasquez, spoke of changing the galaxy, of ending the age of empires built on fear. Propaganda, Essex scoffed. Pretty words to mask their ambition. Perhaps, but consider they had these weapons for decades. By their own account, they could have used them long ago. They could have conquered Earth, then expanded outward, building their own empire. Instead, they hid. They waited. They used their power only when directly threatened. He let that sink in. I have spent centuries studying species. I know ambition when I see it. The humans are not without ambition, but it is not the ambition of conquest. It is something else. Something I do not fully understand. High Counselor Veth studied him for a long moment. You are suggesting we negotiate? I am suggesting we consider all options, including ones that do not involve throwing more ships into a battle we cannot win. The council fell to arguing. Kethral listened but said nothing more. He had spoken his piece. The decision was not his to make. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy was changing, and the dominants would have to change with it or be swept away by the tide of history. On Earth, those same months had been a whirlwind of activity. The truth about the arsenal had been revealed to the world. At first, there had been fury that such a secret had been kept. The governments had hidden this from their people. But that anger had faded quickly as the reality of the situation became clear. Humanity had been threatened with extinction. Humanity had been saved. The details of who knew what and when seemed less important than the fact that they were all still alive. Director Vasquez had addressed the United Nations 3 times in those 6 months, explaining the history of the custodians, the nature of the Forerunner legacy, and humanity's plans for the future. Each address had been watched by billions, the most viewed broadcasts in human history. Her message had remained consistent. Humanity had been given a gift and a responsibility. They would use their power to defend themselves and others. They would not become another Valorian dominance, conquering and enslaving. They would be something new. Not everyone believed her, of course. There were those who wanted humanity to strike first, to use the Titans to attack the dominants before they could rebuild and threaten Earth again. There were those who wanted to use the technology for profit, to claim the arsenal's secrets for themselves. There were those who simply didn't trust anyone with such power. But the majority, the vast, overwhelming majority, supported Vasquez's vision. After centuries of war and conflict, after generations of competition and mistrust, humanity had finally found something to unite around. A common purpose. A shared destiny. They would protect those who could not protect themselves. The first test of that commitment came 2 months after the battle, when a message arrived from a distant star system. The Kethmari had survived. Everyone had believed them extinct, destroyed by the dominants 4,000 years ago for daring to resist. But a small group had escaped, hiding their colony behind elaborate decoys, living in isolation and terror ever since. They had heard about Earth, they had heard about the Titans, and they were asking for help. Director Vasquez called an emergency session of the newly formed Human Council. The Kethmari colony contains approximately 50,000 individuals, she reported. They've been hiding for 4 millennia, living in constant fear of discovery. Their resources are nearly exhausted. Without help, they will die within the next decade. What kind of help do they need? Asked President Chun. Everything. Food, medicine, technology, protection. Vasquez paused. But most importantly, they need to know they're not alone. That someone will stand between them and the dominants if necessary. And we're supposed to be that someone? Chancellor Weber asked. Director, we've barely begun to understand our own situation. We're still learning how to use the technology we have. Are we really prepared to extend protection to an alien species on the other side of the galaxy? No, Vasquez admitted. We're not prepared. We're not ready. We